Hello and welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MS Pierce. This is a frontline update for the 9th of February 2023. Let's go first to what the ISW has to discuss at the beginning of their daily report, which I think is really pertinent because it's talking about what the Russian offensive is looking like, and in fact, that it's here. Type thing. Russian forces have regained the initiative in Ukraine and have begun their next major offensive in Luhansk Oblast. The commitment of significant elements of at least three major Russian divisions to offensive operations in this sector indicates that the Russian offensive has begun, even if Ukrainian forces are so far preventing Russian forces from securing significant gains. I'm actually going to continue reading this because I think it's super important. The Russian offensive likely has not yet reached its full tempo. Russian command has not yet committed elements of the 2nd Motorized Rifle Division, 1st Guards Tank Army, Western Military District, which deployed to Luhansk Oblast in January after deploying to Belarus. Russian forces are gradually beginning an offensive, but its success is not inherent or predetermined. While Russian forces in Luhansk Oblast now have the initiative, in that Russian forces are setting the terms of battle, ending the period of Ukrainian initiative from August 2022, the full commitment of these forces could lead to their eventual culmination along the Svatove-Kreminna line without achieving their objectives of capturing all of Luhansk and Donetsk Oblasts. The culmination would likely provide a window of opportunity for Ukrainian forces to exploit with their own counteroffensive. And then it talks about the reported subordination of Russian mobilized personnel or to DNR formations could also suggest that Russian military command may be continuing efforts to integrate ad hoc DNR and LNR formations into the Russian armed forces, but will likely face significant difficulties. So the idea is that the separatist forces, these militias, are being assimilated into the Russian army, possibly and at the same time, the Wagner group sort of losing its pride of place, losing its momentum, and arguably the ability to recruit from the prisons, as the Russian forces seem to be doing that. So you are getting possibly a change. So it's one kind of uniform Russian force, maybe. That would make sense, strategically speaking. It's a lot easier to command something like that rather than have these disparate elements. But anyway, the idea is that between Kreminna and Svatove, so here on my let's look at a war map. So we go to the northeast here, and we are talking about the Svatove to Kreminna being an area of offensive, but then also south of Kreminna to Bakhmut being an area of offensive, arguably even Avdivka as well. Lots of efforts being put in there, and Vuhledar, but certainly the Svatove Kreminna line, there's and around Kreminna there seems to be this offensive brewing, or at least having already started. There's also a lot of activity up in the Kupiansk area as well. It's worth noting that the Russians want to take, if they want to take Donbass, they need to do this, which is Luhansk, and they don't have the whole of Luhansk yet. But actually, is not an awful lot of the Luhansk to take, and we'll look at that on my map. And then it's the rest of Donetsk. Now that's a much harder task for them to do. That's a real tall order to get all of that. But you could imagine Luhansk is possibly quite achievable. Here, if we look on my map, the Luhansk border would it looks like this. So if you can't really see that line very clearly, oops, not quite accurate there. And yeah, down into this forested area and coming back down there. So actually, to take all of this area isn't too much of an ask for a major offensive. You know, all of this area, yeah, that's quite doable. That's the worst drawing I've ever seen. Now, and in fact, there are claims today, as we'll see, that they have made it over the Kherson River. So this is a river that goes up here. If you remember, there was this river. At the moment, there are some Russian claims that the Russians have crossed that, but in an unspecified location. That might not be true at all. But let's start up north in the Kupiansk area, because actually this is arguably part of the offensive as well, even though they talk about it being the Svatove Kreminna line. So let's go to see what ISW have to say in accumulating sources from both sides. Russian forces are increasing their presence northwest of Svatove and Kupiansk into Verichna areas. There is fierce fighting in Sinkivka. In fact, Defmon says that it might have been lost, but he's got no evidence of that. But there are Russian claims that Sinkivka is under Russian control, or at least it's certainly a grey zone. Russian forces conducted a limited ground attack near Novoselivsk. Okay, let's put this into the context of the map here. So up here in the Kupiansk, you've got Kupiansk there, and just to the northeast of there we have Sinkivka, which is this area now. It could be that is now under Russian control. That would seem very unlikely to me because it's fairly sizable. Could you have fighting within Sinkivka? Far more likely that is the case. And there is then fighting around the Dvorichne and Dvorichne area here. So we have Dvorichne, which is there's the front line going through that town with the railway line, as I showed you yesterday, being the defensive line that the Ukrainians have taken, and that stretches all the way up there. You've got Dvorichne right back here. I don't think the Ukrainians will have lost territory right back there, but there's fighting all around this area. How intense that is, we shall see. We shall see whether this ends up being part of the larger Luhansk offensive, Svatove to Kreminna offensive that the Russians appear to be taking part in. Defmon talks about Russian forces possibly pushing the Ukrainians out of Sinkivka, no visual evidence, and that the Ukrainians repulsed an attack in Novoselivsk. So that is just down here in northwest of Svatove, Kuzmivka. There's still fighting around there. Russians pushing back or trying to push back to regain Novoselivsk, but the Ukrainians appear to have that still in their control and themselves wanting to push the Russians out of Kuzmivka. So there's fighting around there. But then really it seems to be an uptick in fighting all the way from Svatove to Kreminna and south of Kreminna as well. So all this area. The ISW says Sergei Haidai stated on February the 8th, yesterday, that there had been a maximum escalation in the Kreminna direction and that Russian forces are attempting to break through Ukrainian defenses in the area. So they've attacked Perpetua. Several Russian military bloggers circulated unconfirmed footage of unspecified central and western military district elements which crossed the Kherson River running north to south in western Luhansk, roughly parallel to the Svatove-Kreminna line, and captured Ukrainian positions in an unspecified location around February the 6th. Now, there's no geolocated confirmation of that, so must be careful. Russian sources also reported that elements of the 3rd Motor Rifle Division are approaching the Kherson River and are threatening Ukrainian positions in the area. A prominent Russian military blogger posted footage of the 59th Tank Regiment of the 144th Motor Rifle Division attacking towards Torska and claimed that the unit pushed Ukrainian forces back to secondary lines of defense. Again, that's towards Torska, and that's the key word is towards. Chechen head Ramzan Kadyrov claimed that elements of the Chechen Akhmat Special Forces and 2nd Brigade of the Luhansk People's Republic 2nd Army Corps captured Ukrainian positions near Berestova, so that's just south of Belorivka, south of Kreminna. Now, there doesn't seem to be an awful lot of report from other sources on this whole area. In fact, neither on Telegram nor on Twitter does Rebar really mention the Kupiansk down to Svatove area and even down to Kreminna. No reports here says east of Kupiansk, according to Ukrainian experts and intel, there is enemy troop buildup and attack formations are being created. Additional motorized rifle brigades have been formed. Russia is expected to strike there as well. In the vicinity of Kreminna, everything seems that the Russian troops have launched initial attacks across a width. Fighting is reported in the direction of Torska, Ploshchanka, Yampolivka, Chervonopopivka, Belorivka, and the forest south. No significant progress has been reported. So he says no progress, and yet Russians are claiming, that there is progress. Defmon says of Kreminna, Ukrainians repulsed attacks in the area of Chervonopopivka. The Russians are increasing the intensity of attacks in the area and are making advances in the Ploshchanka and Dubrova area. So that is in the forest to the south and north around Ploshchanka. So let's try and make sense of that on my map. Now, remember that the Russians are trying to strike across the Kherson River or reach that. That would make a good place for them to then form a defensive line and then push on to get the rest of the Luhansk Oblast, which, as you can see, goes up like that. So that's ideally what the territory they would like, so they can say that they have captured the Donbass. That is all part of the Donbass. They have made gains around Ploshchanka. Well, I have not changed my maps, but this appears to be the case. And then are fighting towards Torska, and apparently are making gains according to Russian sources, and towards Yampolivka, as well as around Dubrova and in the forested areas. So essentially, lots of activity up there. We'll probably see as the days goes on some map change. It depends just how much Ukraine put into defending. Do they cede territory? It might be more advantageous to cede territory at times rather than to fight for every inch of land. You want to use your defenses wisely. You don't want to bleed. So it's where to take the Russians head on and where to allow them to advance so that you might take up a better defensive position. So it could be, for example, that around here, the defensive position is really poor, but actually it's much easier to defend around here. I'm just making stuff up here. So you allow the Russians to advance there. There's no point fighting them here because actually you won't take as many you won't take as many Russian losses there as you might back here. So allow them to take land if it's useful for you to do so. Okay, let's move on down, and we understand that Bilorivka here, that south of there, Brestova, this is quite a long way south, really nearer Bakhmut, where the Kadyrov has said that the Chechens and the Akhmat are making some gains. I talked yesterday about the Russians really wanting to take this Seversk area, and so in order to do that, or to take Seversk, but they would really want that, and I guess all the way up there as well, which means that places like Spirna here, and places like Brestova, which they already hold, but moving to the west of Brestova, they will need to do. So, you imagine there's going to be attacks from that direction, attacks from that direction towards Seversk, and then attacks from the south up from this kind of Solidar direction. So you will see an awful lot of this. And then, if the Russians can have some success in the forest, Serebrensk forest, then they'll be coming down from there as well. That would, one would assume, would be what they are trying with a larger offensive across this whole front line, across this whole axis. Well, Defmon Met says, attacks all along the area of Shiplivka, Belorivka, Kamyanska, Spirina, and Berestova. The Russians are also involved in demining areas, and the reason they would be wanting to demine all these areas is because they are getting ready for an offensive. So the removal of mines is most likely preparation for an offensive, says Defmon. So as we come down to Bakhmut, let's have a look and see what the ISW has to say. Okay, as we come down into Bakhmut, let's just zoom out. So Bakhmut is here, and we have fighting all the way from Bilorivka down to Bakhmut, and sort of south and southeast west of Bakhmut as well. So basically fighting all along here. As I've told you, moving towards Seversk as well as trying to encircle Bakhmut itself. What does the ISW say? Well, Russian forces have made marginal advances north of Bakhmut near Krasnohora and Zalizhnyanska. Russian forces are visually confirmed to be 2.5 kilometers away from the E40 Bakhmut-Sloviansk highway. I'd actually say they are considerably closer than that. No report says in Bakhmut the situation is precarious. The M03 in Sloviansk is operationally cut. Russian troops are in the vicinity of the highway. Ukraine does fight back. The aim is to encircle Ukrainian troops in Paraskovivka and Krasnohora. In the latter, some positions have reportedly been abandoned. So this sort of fits in with claims that, down here, Russian sources claim that Wagner group fighters took control of Krasnohora and are fighting northeast of Bakhmut. I don't know that that's true. I think that would be some over-exaggeration. Military bloggers claim that Wagner group forces established fire control over the T0504 highway between Stopochki and Ivaniska. We'll get on to that in a little bit. Let's look at Poulet-Volon's map as a way of clearly being able to understand this. So there are attacks going north. It doesn't seem to be as much news, though, coming from these northern areas towards Fedorivka, Rozdolivka, Vesele. As you can see, only 3 arrows instead of 53. But no, the main source of engagement is around this Blahatny, Krasnohora, Paraskevivka area. So Paraskevivka and Krasnohora, they're looking to encircle that by moving towards this M03 road that the ISW said they are about 2.5 kilometers away from. This is actually 1.25 kilometers. So that's 1.25 rather than them being back here. They are definitely close to this road, and yeah, that road is pretty much unusable. But there are lots of Ukrainian forces based around here, as you can see from Poulet-Volant's map. The claim from null reports is that some of the positions in Krasnohora have been abandoned. I mean, goodness me, you wouldn't want to be fighting Krasnohora as a Ukrainian at the moment. That encirclement is looking fairly dangerous there. So just to put that onto my map as we come down here, you can see I've left the blue line there just to show you over the last couple of days where the advances have been for the Russians. They've crossed the road here. They crossed the railway line, then the road, and then into this trench network area. I don't know how much of these trench networks that they now have under their control, but they have certainly moved towards the southwest here, towards this E40 highway, and looking to link up with the kind of bridgehead past the garden centre towards the junction of the highway here, south of Paraskevivka. There hasn't actually been any movement here for a couple of days, really. And in fact, I've not seen any movement around here at all for the last couple of days. I know that there's fierce fighting going on. Most of the movement is coming from this little salient here. Obviously, the Russians need to be careful that they're not cut from some counterattack coming from the north, but I don't know that is something that's likely or possible to happen. And one other thing to say on the Krasnohora front, this is from OSINT Defender using the ISW interactive map. Russian and Wagner forces are claiming to have captured all remaining Ukrainian positions to the north of the E40 highway earlier today, including the towns of Krasnohora and Paraskevivka. So the ISW map shows that is, if not fully under Russian control, then claimed Russian control. And that, yeah, it's not looking good. So if we look at their interactive map, that's exactly what it presently says. So that is a real worry if that is the case, but I've not seen that reported anywhere else. But that's the situation in the north. In some sense, a little bit quieter, maybe in the news that's coming out. At least on the details front, I don't have too many details about the entire eastern and southern front around Opitny and in the Miezo Kombinat district and here near the Art Winery. All seems to be pretty much stable, but that doesn't mean there isn't hugely fierce fighting going on. Going further down south in Bakhmut in the south, no new information is known, says null reports, other than the AFU has repelled an attack in the direction of Chasiv Yar, according to the General Staff. This is most likely a frontal attack from Ivaniska Forest to reach a crossroads between Stupochki and Ivaniska. For now, the Ukrainians hold. This is here, so we are looking at probably that's the crossroads they're talking about, which is between Stupochki and Ivanivska. That's where they are pressuring towards, but you've got this canal as well that they don't seem to be on the western side of, apart from back here to some degree, just to the west of Klishchivka, which is over there. I've actually adapted my map to fit in a deep state map that I did have the Russians over here on this kind of aggregates area there, high ground, and I pulled them back to the canal here, so just to be in line with other mappers at the moment. Poulet-Volant, as their map sort of comes south, we can see that the pressure is all on around the city, and actually Poulet-Volant doesn't have them quite as close to the road as I have them, a little bit more advanced here, but also has them pulled back to the canal, and they have crossed the canal further down south, more opposite Klishchivka. So actually that fits in line with what Deep State has too. So just trying to get alignment of maps, trying to get the best fit for all the information. As I mentioned yesterday, it's all going to be about pushing the Ukrainians back to the river here. Whether the Ukrainians are doing some form of operational withdrawal and bleeding the Russians as much as possible, I'm not sure. That's kind of what the understanding I had yesterday, but I haven't heard anything today. And then the last line of defense will be this this railway line here that goes through, comes out up from the north and goes through the town. If that's breached, of course, there's hardly anything left of Bakhmut anyway. But you've got those two lines of defense. But that's about as much as I know of in Bakhmut at the moment. We'll move further down south. So I'll go back to my map, and we're going to move to Avdivka. So let's just come out of there, Bakhmut, and down to Avdivka here, where there has been fierce fighting over the last few days. Sorry, I am going to throw in Colombo style Defmon's final analysis of Bakhmut. So clear advance by the Russians, both north and south of Bakhmut. The envelopment is getting more and more narrow. At this rate, I think it's a matter of days rather than weeks before the Ukrainians give the order to evacuate. So he doesn't see Bakhmut holding for too much longer. We come down to Avdivka. Defmon says, Kamyanka, Avdivka, Vodyany, Perpetua, Krasnohorivka, and Marinka. Russians still not capture Marinka despite claims late last year. They still just attack as much as before, but the quality of attacks has dropped. Let's look at the map. So there are attacks around Avdivka, but from the north, quite a lot of fighting around Kamyanka there. And also Perpetua as well is back on the map for being attacked. And Vodyany, he's got an attack going sort of somewhat northwesterly direction. Poulet Volant seems to think that they are attacking along that line from Vodyany. So this is Avdivka here. There's fighting also in Defmon doesn't have it on his maps. There's fighting, fierce fighting down there. That I said yesterday there was a lot of losses of Russian material around this area. So there is fighting there and troop losses as well, and fighting around Vodyany and moving up through Perpetua too. Right, so let's come out of Avdivka and just pop down to Marinka, which is just down southwest of Avdivka. And the claims have been a long time from people like Rebar that are fighting on the western outskirts. I'm just going to unpick a couple of claims here today. So the ISW says quite a lot on Marinka. Another mill blogger claimed that fighting is ongoing in western Marinka on the southwestern outskirts of Donetsk city, and that unspecified elements of the southern military district (SMD) advanced through the urban areas of Marinka on February the 8th. The mill blogger also stated that Russian forces were able to gain a foothold in positions near a tire plant in Marinka. Videos posted by mill bloggers on February the 8th reportedly showed the SMD tanker units attacking a Ukrainian position in Marinka and Russian tanks operating in western Marinka. Former Deputy LNR Interior Minister Vitaly Kiselev posted a video on February the 8th purportedly showing Russian elements of the 150th Motorized Rifle Division Combined Arms Army attacking Marinka, and claimed that Russian forces had cleared all Ukrainian fortifications there. The deployment of valuable Russian conventional military units, as opposed to DNR proxy forces, in the area is notable if confirmed. Gherkin, however, so Igor Gherkin, has claimed that the situation in Marinka has not changed and continues at a sluggish pace. In fact, Suryak Maps, a pro-Russian source, says clashes between Russian forces and Ukrainian army continue in the center of Marinka without significant changes. The town is completely destroyed after nearby 1 year of clashes. Video footage shows Russian tanks targeting former supermarket at Druzhby Avenue. So that's the road going down the center. The battle for Marinka from Rebar. Rebar says Russian infantry and tank units are continuing their assaults on AFU stronghold in Marinka. The channel Tankist 4 says that units in the central part of town managed to advance along Oktyabskra Street, getting close to northern Druzhba Avenue. Okay, so this is going back to the center. The most significant problem continues to be the Ukrainians' intact supply lines. They continue to send reinforcements to western Marinka, keeping the fighting going for months. Russian units are having trouble identifying and targeting enemy units hiding in the ruins. Still, Russian forces are achieving local successes. They managed to consolidate near the tire plant, from which units of the 79th Division of the AFU had been pushed out earlier. so on and so forth. So this is really interesting that you've got massively different claims from within the Russian. None of these claims are Ukrainian, right? I'm giving you only explicitly Russian claims here, and they're saying that they've got them. They're on the last strongholds in Marinka. They're just clearing them out. To their nothing's happened. To there being a small gain around the tire plant and moving towards the centre. And Drewsbury Avenue. So Drewsbury Avenue is this one that goes all the way down, cuts through the middle. They have made some gains around here. The Russians in the southwest. But other than that, it seems to be the same. Now, when I go and look at the claims for these, so ISW always footnotes the claims for the mill bloggers are saying. I go to these Telegram posts, right? This Telegram post for one of them is basically the RT video that was posted on YouTube the other day. That is going to be it's going to be a bit loud here. Sorry, I can't seem to change the music, the sound levels on these Telegram videos, but this is the one that flips between snow and not snow and splicing together different video footage that is not from the same time. Beneath the video, that says, report that in Marinka, all the fortified areas of the Armed Forces of Ukraine were cleared. Attack aircraft of the 150 Division knocked out the militants of the Armed Forces of Ukraine from all strategically significant objects in the city and are nearing completion of its liberation. And the video that it shows above, you can see starts with no snow at all. No snow at all. Snow. No snow. Snow. And basically, that's a video that RT showed the other day that I think has absolutely no value at all. It doesn't really tell you anything. And then the other linked claims that the ISW has for, the Russians clearing out and doing X, Y, and Z and on the West are basically just videos of, I won't play them because we've got loud music, but their videos of smoking buildings. You can't tell where they are. And there's no necessary Russian presence. It's just all kind of meaningless videos showing you not a lot, saying things like, here says, tankers of the Southern Military District unwind the last enemy Oporniks in Marinka. The denouement is close here. Just really generalized claims. In other words, I don't think you can put a lot of store in the Russian claims that they are clearing out the Ukrainians of Marinka, and I think it probably is quite difficult in Marinka. Of course, it's difficult, and the Russians may be making some slow advances in certain areas, but I don't think it's remotely what some of these Telegram channels are saying. And on the other hand, when you've got Rebar walking back claims that it's not happening in the western outskirts now, because Rebar was probably listening to too many of these claims, you've now got Rebar being somewhat more sensible, and you've got Syriac Map saying, yeah, there's no change here. Then I don't think there is change. So basically, be warned about claims about Marinka. I think it's relatively unclaimed. Let's go very quickly to Vuhledar and Zaporizhia in general. As for Vuhledar, the ISW says, again, conflicting claims from Russians, some saying that there's fierce fighting going on, others saying that actually it's quietened down and there's not a lot of fighting going on. Igor Girkin has claimed that the Russians have taken huge losses around Vuhledar. There's plenty of video footage of stuff getting blown up that you can find online. Tatrugami, who keeps a daily sort of update of Vuhledar going, says about a week ago I wrote that the enemy moved a brigade from the 3rd Army Corps. Given the enemy revealed itself, I think it's time to add more details for the public. Based on open source intelligence, it's likely that on the 6th, the enemy decided to utilize the so-called volunteer battalion Alga, which is part of the 76th Brigade and the 3rd Army Corps. Do not confuse with the Ukrainian 76th Brigade, 72nd Brigade. Sorry, confirming the information which I published previously. It was formed in Tatarstan and predominantly, albeit not entirely, comprised of ethnic Volga Tatars. Thanks to that information from open source evidence, hopefully we'll see, it says more obituaries of those Russian soldiers soon. But it is another so why I mention this, it's another indicator that both the 155th and the 40th Naval Infantry Brigades, these are these elite crack brigades that have been decimated twice in terms of the 155th and been sort of possibly rendered combat combat ineffective, are no longer capable to perform significant assaults, which is why the enemy uses ethnic battalions and mobilize to retain some pressure. The results are predictably disastrous. And then he provides source links to those claims. I think they are eager to decimate themselves for Putin. Alga is comprised of volunteers, not mobilized. They decided to die for the empire, and they did. So he says there's no remorse there. Interesting as well that this very good video that Dimitri War Translated has translated from a guy inside footage of a guy inside Vuhledar commenting on what it's like there. And you can listen to it. Greetings, my friends. We are now inside the city of Vuhledar. Battles with the Russian invaders continue. This is what the city looks like. You can observe the work of the Russian artillery. That's on the buildings. And you can just listen to that soundscape. The battles continue. And he goes, looks around Vuhledar, and then later on you can see just the sheer destruction. And he says, the enemy is trying to capture the city to be able to move forward, but what can be said? The Ukrainians are stunning. According to witnesses, the invaders advanced with 2 companies with tanks and BMP, those infantry fighting vehicles, elite tanks, T-80s. Nothing was left of them. Our artillery, our anti-tank teams completely devastated the elite crews and tanks. And then he shows some footage of one of those columns getting taken apart. But there you go. Just not good for the Russians in the Vuhledar area, as pretty much according to everyone. So again, Vuhledar, to remind you, is that place on high ground just north of Pavlivka and Mikilska. You've got some dachas, these sort of rural settlements just to the southwest and to the southeast and east. They've been flattened by artillery. The Russians tried to attack in 2 directions this time. In November, they only tried to attack from Pavlivka, got destroyed. The same people have tried, or what's left of them, 155th, tried to attack again from 2 directions, got destroyed again. The Ukrainian artillery is just really active here, and they can be spotted by the people on the heights there. And are really effective in taking out just columns and columns of material. Just decimation of the Russians in that area. And then basically, there was a repelled attack, I believe, from the Russians to the west there, up towards Perpetua. Up to supposedly in a direction of Bohoyavlenka, but of course that's way behind there, so it's going to be somewhere around here in that northerly direction. And other than that, not much to report really on the Zaporizhia front. No report says there are reinforcements pouring into there, so I don't know whether the Russians have some intentions on attacking from within the Zaporizhia Oblast. Who knows? There are reports that the Russians are still doing extensive trench building and defences building, all in all of these areas. But I'm going to move to Kherson just really briefly. ISW says that the UK MOD reported that Russian and Ukrainian forces have likely deployed small groups on the Kherson Spit in Mykolaiv Oblast, aiming to control the Dnipro Gulf. Ukraine's Southern Operational Command spokesperson Humenyuk previously stated that Russian forces are increasing the number of reconnaissance and sabotage attempts in the area of the Dnipro River Delta as part of an information operation to create a perceived threat against Kherson city. So whether this is to try and fix Ukrainian forces and elements around the Dnipro, I don't know, but there's increased activity from the Russians along the river, although there were reports yesterday of 7 boats being taken out by the Ukrainians and possibly activity on the Kherson Peninsula. That will be ongoing. There you go. That's the report for today. Expect there to be much more news coming out of the Luhansk area, from Svatove to Kreminna, or really Kupiansk to Kreminna, as well as obviously in the Bakhmut area. Really from Bakhmut north, you're going to have a lot of fierce fighting, because it looks like the Russian offensive is really starting to take place. Anyway, thanks so much for your support. Please like, subscribe, and share. All the ways you can support the channel are in the description below. Particularly like my last two videos have been restricted by YouTube for like no known reason. Like I can't work out. Sometimes when you have like a picture, like a bit of video footage of an IFV being blown up, they like cut ad ads for that and stuff. So any way you can help the channel is super appreciated. Thanks anyway. I'll speak to you later.